In the annals of Turkish history, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk is revered as the founder of the Republic, a national hero who led his people to victory and independence. Yet, behind the myths and the medals lies a story not often told, a tale of alliances and betrayals that would forever change the course of history. What if the man we know as the savior of Turkey wasn't quite the hero we think? What if, at a critical moment in history, he turned to the very powers that had crushed the Ottoman Empire? What if Ataturk's rise to power was not just the result of a national struggle, but the outcome of calculated moves with the British Empire? This documentary will uncover the truth. The British, often thought to be Ataturk's enemies, might have been his silent allies. Through covert dealings and political maneuvers, the British played a pivotal role in shaping the future of modern Turkey. But what did Ataturk give in return for their support? A seat of power, military leverage, political concessions, and at what cost? The so-called honest Kemalists might never reveal certain facts about Mustafa Kemal, truths that may come as a surprise to many. To fully grasp the context, it's essential to understand the rich diversity of the Ottoman Empire. Unlike a homogeneous society, the Ottoman realm was a vibrant mosaic of cultures and ethnicities. Its history stretches back to the Roman Empire, when elite Armenian knights were brought to Istanbul from Armenia. From its establishment through its golden era, the Ottoman Empire was a model of inclusivity, where individuals from all backgrounds had opportunities to contribute. Talented individuals, irrespective of ethnicity, thrived within the state's ranks, serving in various capacities across the empire. Turks, Greeks, Armenians, Bulgarians, Hungarians, Bosnians, Arabs, Kurds, Syriacs and others lived and worked together in harmony across the vast expanse of Ottoman lands. This multicultural fabric was a defining characteristic of one of history's most enduring empires. The arrival of Turkish tribes in regions such as Azerbaijan, Anatolia, Armenia, and Kurdistan during the first millennium AD marked a significant shift in the region's dynamics. These tribes, driven by expansionist ambitions, left an indelible impact on the Middle East, Europe, and Africa through waves of invasions and acts of plunder. In their campaigns, the Turks strategically adopted Islam, wielding it as both a shield and a justification for their conquests. This duality allowed them to consolidate power and expand their reach under the guise of religious unity, forever altering the socio-political and cultural landscapes of the regions they touched. Turkish administrators, following the establishment of the Republic, projected the achievements of the Ottoman Empire as if they were exclusively Turkish, rewriting history to suit their narrative. They propagated the idea of a Turkish-centric Ottoman legacy to the new generations, conveniently omitting critical details. For instance, the Ottoman dynasty itself referred to the Turks as etrakı bih idrak, a term implying a lack of understanding. This historical nuance was deliberately hidden as the state sought to foster a sense of nationalism. Mustafa Kemal's approach exemplified this strategy. To gain the allegiance of the Kurdish population during the fight to expel foreign invaders, he made calculated promises. He pledged Kurdish autonomy and traveled to Kurdistan, where he met with influential Kurdish agas and sheiks. Playing to their religious sentiments, he sought their cooperation, even going as far as publicly showing respect. Photographs exist of him kissing the hands of Kurdish leaders. However, this goodwill was short-lived. By 1925, after consolidating power, Mustafa Kemal adopted policies of Kurdish denial, betraying the very promises that had secured their support. His complex character extended beyond political maneuvering. Those who have delved deeply into his life know that he was an atheist, a fact he openly admitted in his personal writings. These revelations paint a portrait of a leader whose actions were often at odds with his public persona. We are all familiar with the chilling rise of Nazi Germany. In 1933 to 1934, as Adolf Hitler ascended to power through a combination of electoral success and a de facto coup d'etat, the streets echoed with cries of "Long live Hitler," and Nazi swastika flags dominated public spaces. However, less commonly discussed is the connection between Hitler and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Their relationship, though not widely publicized, had elements of mutual influence, particularly regarding their shared emphasis on nationalism and the propagation of racial ideologies. Hitler closely studied Ataturk's methods, drawing inspiration from his strategies for consolidating power. Both leaders prioritized controlling the press, followed by gaining dominance over universities and public institutions. Hitler's systematic takeover mirrored the blueprint laid out by Mustafa Kemal. However, there was a notable distinction. Mustafa Kemal operated with the implicit support of a powerful ally, the British, who played a significant role as his so-called guardian angels. This dynamic added an additional layer of complexity to his consolidation of authority. Under Mustafa Kemal's administration, a system of propaganda emerged that drew clear inspiration from Nazi Germany. The regime sought to reshape historical narratives and redefine the region's demographic structures to fit its nationalist vision. Geographies with distinct identities, such as Georgia, Armenia, Kurdistan, and Lazistan, were systematically erased and rebranded under the blanket term Anatolia. This effort went beyond semantics. It was a deliberate attempt to rewrite the cultural and historical fabric of these lands. Ancient Kurdish and Armenian settlements were stripped of their original names and replaced with fabricated Turkish ones, erasing centuries of heritage. The assimilation efforts extended further, with Turkish-speaking communities being resettled in predominantly Kurdish provinces like Sivas, Marash, and Antep. To institutionalize this revisionism, the government established organizations like the Turkish History, Language, and Geography institutions. These entities were tasked with crafting distorted and often false definitions of history, language, and geography, cementing the administration's version of events. These measures reflected an aggressive campaign to homogenize the nation's identity and suppress the diversity that once defined the region. Since 1928, with the campaign Citizens Speak Turkish, they forcibly taught Turkish to everyone living in the country. They fined people who spoke other languages. Thus, they Turkified the majority of the people living in Turkey. Turkish schools teach that Syria is a French mandate and Iraq is an English mandate, but they always hide the fact that Turkey is also an English mandate. It is not in vain that a British Chamber of Commerce chief executive recently made a statement saying, "There are companies that have made direct investments in Turkey from the UK, or there are 3,000 registered British companies with British capital." Isn't it interesting that no country other than England supports Turkey, which requires foreign debt even these days? Mustafa Kemal, who is a mulatto, was born in Thessaloniki, Greece. When the Turkish Republic was established with the help and support of the British, as stated in the 10th anniversary march, Onuncu Yıl Marşı, composed in 1933. In 10 years, they created 15 million Turkophone fake young Turks of all ages. They formed a horde of brainwashed zombies, assimilated by oppression and violence. To give an example, they instilled in people with blonde hair and blue eyes, born in the province of Afyon, that they were Turkish of Central Asian origin. Today, these Turkophone people communicate with the Devshirme Azerbaijanis of Aryan origin and Central Asian Turks of Mestizo origin, and instill Turkish racism and skullism through various institutions and organizations such as universities. The claim arises that there is little in Turkey today that genuinely originates from what is called Turkishness. Instead, much of it is said to be fabricated or borrowed from other cultures. Linguistically, the argument holds that 50% of the Turkish language stems from Pahlavi, an ancient Iranian language, while an estimated 75% of the Turkish spoken in Turkey consists of words of foreign or even Kurdish origin. This perspective extends beyond language, asserting that the very identity of the Republic of Turkey, its leadership under Mustafa Kemal, its history, and its culture, is a patchwork of borrowed elements. In this view, much of what is celebrated as uniquely Turkish is perceived as stolen, compiled, and lacking authenticity, painting a stark picture of a constructed national identity. While Adolf Hitler has been condemned and erased from much of history's mainstream narrative, a parallel critique emerges regarding modern Turkey. Supported by the British, Some argue that the cultural landscape in Turkey continues to perpetuate distortions through media, with TV series glorifying fabricated narratives and fostering Turkish nationalism. This, it is claimed, perpetuates a deep-rooted dogmatism among segments of the population. Critics suggest that these individuals fail to recognize the disconnect between their appearance and the Turkic peoples of Yakutia, Ottoman, and Altai, regions that are considered the ancestral homelands of the Turkic identity. This preference for uncritical acceptance over rational comparison is attributed to the legacy of Ataturk. With British support, he is alleged to have engineered a fake nation, constructing an artificial sense of unity and identity that, to some, represents a fundamental and lasting flaw in modern Turkey's foundation. The absence of a DNA research center during Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's time raises intriguing questions. Was Ataturk ever subjected to a DNA test? These queries provoke a defensive response from his supporters, who often argue, what does his origin matter? It's his ideology that counts. To those proponents, a stark recommendation emerges. Respect the Kurdish people living on their ancestral lands. Cease imposing upon them. Stop disrupting their lives. And end the campaigns of terror and oppression against them. For the Kurdish people, Ataturk's legacy holds no meaning. It does not resonate with their history, identity, or struggles. Respecting this reality is not only a matter of justice, but also a necessary step toward coexistence. Let us examine Mustafa Kemal's relationship with the British in more detail. It is well documented that Kemal made the decision to retreat rather than confront the British Army commander, General Allenby, on the Palestine front. As a result, 75,000 Turkish soldiers were left to be captured, an outcome that had significant ramifications for the Ottoman military. This retreat directly led to the signing of the Armistice of Mudros, a humiliating agreement that marked the collapse of the front and signaled the end of Ottoman resistance in the region. It is also important to note that Rauf Orbay, a key figure who signed the armistice on behalf of the Ottoman Empire, was a close ally of Mustafa Kemal. This connection further complicates the narrative of Kemal's role during the final stages of the Ottoman Empire's involvement in World War I. The aftermath of these decisions would lay the groundwork for the political and military changes that followed, many of which would involve significant interaction with British interests. To gain a deeper understanding of the situation, it is important to consider the perspective of Count Carlo Sforza, the former Italian foreign minister, regarding the Armistice of Mudros. As mentioned earlier, Rauf Orbay was the signatory of the armistice on behalf of the Ottoman Empire. This agreement, which marked the end of hostilities between the Ottoman Empire and the Allied forces, is often seen as a pivotal moment in the empire's downfall. It is also worth noting that Rauf Orbay, despite his role in signing the armistice, later became prime minister under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's leadership. This connection between Orbay and Ataturk adds complexity to the events that followed, suggesting that Orbay's political trajectory, shaped by the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, would influence the formation of the new Republic of Turkey. We'll revisit this connection in more detail as we continue. Count Carlo Sforza, speaking of the Armistice of Mudros, says that the British acted moderately towards the ground troops. Although the immediate surrender of the navy was requested, there was no mention of the abolition of the land army or its immediate abandonment of weapons. On the contrary, while only the abolition of the mobilization was demanded, the provision of internal security and the protection of the borders and the amount of army required for this were excluded from the demobilization. Count Carlo Sforza sees a hidden purpose in this and says, the British government already sees a conflict between the heirs of the Ottoman Empire and, with its customary hypocritical policy, demands. If the demands of the Allies take a form that will bore the British, they can put the Turks, who are still capable of resistance, in a position to use for their own benefit. Count Carlo Sforza's opinion suggests that, even at the moment of signing the Armistice of Mudros, the British were already considering the formation of a new military force. This was a time when Sultan Vahiduddin had not even contemplated assembling a resistance force in Anatolia. Sforza's analysis implies that, recognizing the potential for future conflict, the British were proactive in seeking out individuals who could serve their strategic interests. It is for this reason that the British reportedly found Mustafa Kemal before Sultan Vahiduddin. While the Sultan was focused on the immediate aftermath of the armistice, the British had already identified Kemal as a figure who could be utilized to further their goals in the region. This early recognition of Mustafa Kemal's potential suggests that the British were carefully planning their next moves in the delicate geopolitical landscape of the post-Ottoman world. While Sultan Wahiduddin and Grand Vizier Ferid Pasha were trying to defend Mustafa Kemal against the English and send him to Anatolia because of his great reputation in the country and his image of an honest man to be trusted, Mustafa Kemal was in contact with the notables of the Entente governments in Istanbul and was taking instructions from them. In addition, Priest Fru, who was the spy agency of the British in Istanbul, established the English Friendship Association and, in short, tried to ensure the political ambitions of the British in the East, had previously contacted Monsieur Kemal. In fact, Monsieur Kemal himself, in his interviews with the manager of the Pera Palace Hotel, a French but English agent, Monsieur Martin, that took place several times, personally states that he considered Priest Fru a virtuous person who is a servant to humanity and to justice. Ralph Orbay also states that Monsieur Kemal met with Priest Fru, an intelligence service member, before he went to Anatolia. Monsieur Kemal Pasha had little acquaintance with civilians, especially foreigners, apart from his fellow soldiers in Istanbul. Only through the Italian contractor Dinari, who had kidnapped Ismail Kanbulat Bey from prison, he contacted several times with the Italian delegate in Istanbul, Count Carlo Sforza, who later became the Minister of Foreign Affairs. While he was at the Pera Palace Hotel, he met 2 or 3 times with Father Fru, who was later understood to be a brilliant intelligentsia service member from the British, through Monsieur Martin, the manager of this hotel. Minister of Internal Affairs Ahmet Rashid Ray Bey says, the British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, who had fueled his hostility in Turkey's haste to enter the war, thoroughly remembered the removal of the caliphate from the Ottoman lineage and the destruction of the Ottoman Sultanate, fearing the persistent attempts of the Indian Muslims in favor of the Turkish Sultanate, which had the caliphate after the war. But he was worried that his allies would disagree with this cause. For this, he did not hesitate to resort to illegitimate means. One of these ways was Venizelos, and the other was a spy priest named Robert Fru, whom he recruited from the Indian service to the Istanbul service. His aide, Cevat Abbas, who praises Monsieur Kemal at every opportunity, also writes in his memoirs, Ataturk met with the Italian representative Count Carlo Sforza and Father Robert Fru separately and on intermittent dates towards the end of the months he was in Istanbul. Dagobert von Mikush also confirms that Kemal had secretly met with some members of the British intelligence before he left Istanbul. As a matter of fact, in the first volume of Stanford J. Shaw's 6-volume work published in English by the Turkish Historical Society, it is stated that Monsieur Kemal proposed the following striking plan to J.G. Bennett, who served as the British control officer in the Ottoman War Ministry and was also the head of British intelligence MI6 in Istanbul, to establish a Turkish army under British control. Kemal wanted to establish a Turkish army under British control. The English version of the article reads, Chiwait, to whom he suggested the idea to organize a Turkish army under British officers. On November 14, 1918, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk met with George Ward Price, a correspondent for the British Daily Mail newspaper. This meeting is significant, as it suggests that Ataturk discussed the idea of organizing a Turkish army under the guidance of British officers. This interaction highlights the potential for collaboration between Kemal and British interests in the early stages of his political and military career. The notion of a Turkish army led by British officers further reflects the strategic discussions taking place during this tumultuous period in history. George Ward Price recalls his meeting with Mustafa Kemal at the Pera Palace in the following terms. Kemal asked me to let me know how he would contact the British authorities for an offer he wanted to make. We fought on the wrong front in this war. We never wanted to fight with our old friend, the British. We know we lost the party. I fully knew that Anatolia would be occupied by the Allied powers. A British rule over this land should not be so dissatisfied. In this recounting, Ataturk expressed regret over the conflict with Britain and acknowledged the inevitable occupation of Anatolia by the Allied powers. Despite the defeat, Kemal's openness to British rule suggests a pragmatic approach to the situation, with an understanding of the power dynamics at play. His words reflect a complex political stance during a time of profound change in the Ottoman Empire and the broader region. After saying that the British administration in Anatolia should not be so disturbed, Kemal will convey to the occupying authorities through a journalist that he is ready to work as a governor in the British administration over these lands. If the British accept responsibility for Anatolia, they will need to work in cooperation with the experienced Turkish governors under British rule. I would like to know if there will be a suitable place where I can offer my services under such authority. In his meeting with George Ward Price, Mustafa Kemal subtly indicates his desire for political and administrative authority under British guidance, suggesting that he wanted to be a governor of sorts, with the power to govern Anatolia. This request for political authority aligns with his broader strategy of aligning with British interests during this period of uncertainty. In contrast, in his proposal to John G. Bennett, Kemal shifts his focus to military authority, demanding the ability to lead a Turkish army under British oversight. This dual approach, seeking both political and military control, demonstrates Kemal's flexibility in pursuing a path that would ensure both his influence and the cooperation of the British as he navigated the complex political landscape of the post-war Ottoman Empire. These interactions highlight the strategic mindset of Mustafa Kemal as he sought to secure power and influence in a rapidly changing world. Now, let's see if Kemal got the political and military positions he demanded from the British. While Monsieur Kemal Ataturk was in Samsun, he wrote to the Grand Vizier, Ferid Pasha, and the Chief of the Military Staff, Sevad Pasha, and had someone named Hamid Bey appointed to the Samsun Inspectorate. Even though his dismissal was decided because of his bad relationship with the Minister of Internal Affairs, the British applied to the Istanbul government to leave him in his place. The occupation of Istanbul on March 16, 1920, and the raiding and dissolution of the Ottoman Parliament. After the defeat in the Palestine front, Monsieur Kemal demanded peace with the British, the establishment of a new government, and Rauf Bey, who will sign the Armistice of Mondros, and himself a ministry in this government, in a telegram he sent to Sultan Vahiduddin. Right at the beginning of the documentary, we asked you to write it down in a corner of your mind. That Rauf Orbay, who signed the Armistice of Mudros, was later made Prime Minister in Ankara by Kemal, almost as if he were rewarded. Based on the 7th article of this armistice, the British officially and de facto occupied Istanbul and dispersed the Ottoman Parliament. The British raiding and dissolving the Ottoman Assembly in Istanbul, that is, the Mekli-i Mebusan, was to ensure that the deputies go to the assembly established by Monsieur Kemal in Ankara, and thus collapse Istanbul and reinforce it. They even took some deputies themselves. For example, an English ship took Miralay Selahaddin Bey to Anatolia. Thus, Monsieur Kemal was brought to the forefront as a political actor by the English. In this raid, many deputies, especially Rauf Orbay, were arrested by the British. We have no doubt that the British made this move in agreement with Monsieur Kemal and Rauf Orbay. As a matter of fact, Yunus Nadi, a member of the parliament, writes in his memoirs that Rauf Bey gave the following answer to those who suggested he escape. Our decision is the decision. However, if we fend off this much of the incident as enough, the lower part of the assembly will panic and disperse. I want the assembly not to be dissolved, but to be dissolved. I see this as my duty especially. Rauf Orbay nearly reveals the depth of the agreement when he states, I will stay here to get the British to storm the assembly. To clarify further, he adds, I will go to Istanbul to the parliament, and if what you say does not happen, for you to establish a national government in Anatolia, I will sacrifice myself by detonating a bomb in the middle of the parliament. This dramatic statement by Orbay sheds light on the high stakes of the political maneuvering at the time. Orbay's willingness to go as far as self-sacrifice in a desperate attempt to catalyze change speaks to the tension and determination within the group working alongside Mustafa Kemal. It is also noteworthy that Mustafa Kemal sent a coded telegram to the commanders of the 12th, 3rd, and 15th Corps in Konya, Sivas, and Erzurum, respectively. In this communication, he warned that the British were likely to increase their encroachment on Istanbul, potentially arresting ministers and deputies, with a specific focus on Rauf Bey. This telegram reveals Kemal's foresight and strategic planning. As he sought to shape the unfolding political landscape in Anatolia, while dealing with the threat posed by British actions in Istanbul. How does he know about the events that will take place on March 16th on January 22nd? It is obvious that these are pre-planned moves to strengthen Monsieur Kemal's hand. Kemalist Sabahattin Selik writes about the occupation of Istanbul. The Entente powers greatly aided the success of the Anatolian Revolution by officially and de facto occupation of Istanbul on March 16, 1920. Dagobert von Mikusch, on the other hand, could not help writing the following on this subject. The British brought Kemal to such a conclusion that Kemal could not have reached such a conclusion through his friends. Professor Dr. Halil Inalcik also notes that the occupation actually strengthened the movement led by Mustafa Kemal. Kemal's dream was realized when the British raided and dissolved the Ottoman Parliament in Istanbul. This pivotal moment allowed Kemal to score a significant victory, akin to a take-and-throw pass in football, where the British unwittingly handed him the opportunity to challenge the established order. With the dissolution of the Parliament, there were no longer any substantial obstacles standing in his way. He had successfully established a state within the state, solidifying his position and paving the way for his leadership in Anatolia. This strategic turn of events exemplifies how Mustafa Kemal was able to turn the political chaos to his advantage, laying the groundwork for the formation of the Republic of Turkey. English military support to Monsieur Kemal. The British to provide ammunition to Monsieur Kemal Ataturk. On June 13, 1921, an English delegation arrived in Inebolu with a shipment of ammunition for Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, following the orders of General Harrington. This supply was a significant act of British support for the national forces during a critical time of their struggle. British assurances that they would not interfere with the national forces. Kuvayı Milliye. On September 25, 1919, before the full presence of the Kuvayı Milliye was felt, General Sally Clade sent a military officer to Fuad Pasha, along with a delegation of British control officers to Eskişehir. This delegation made an important promise. The British would never interfere with the internal affairs of the national forces. This diplomatic gesture further solidified the relationship between the British and the emerging Kemalist movement. Withdrawal of British forces in Merziphon. Around the same time, the British sought the Kuvayı Milliye's opinion on whether they would be satisfied if the British forces stationed in Merziphon were withdrawn. Upon receiving a positive response from the Kemalists stating that "we would be very pleased," the British promptly withdrew their forces from Merziphon, first relocating to Samsun and then eventually back to Istanbul. These actions illustrate the strategic support that Mustafa Kemal received from the British military at various junctures, contributing to the foundation of his power in Anatolia. Similarly, an English captain informed Ali Fuad Pasha that the English division in Ankara will be withdrawn. This piece of information was quickly relayed by Ali Fuad Pasha to the general staff in a telegram, marking another strategic moment in the shifting balance of power in Anatolia. In essence, the British were handing over Anatolia to Mustafa Kemal. Dagobert von Mikusch highlighted the astonishing nature of this development, stating, "It is truly astonishing. The victors gave the general, that is, Monsieur Kemal, all the necessary comfort and sufficient time to make his preparations, as a result of which their peace treaties would be broken. This raises important questions. Why and how did these events unfold in such a way, seemingly contradicting the outward appearance of British politics? According to Dagobert von Mikusch, it becomes necessary to consider that Monsieur Kemal is making a secret agreement with the British, and this agreement will always remain confidential. This notion suggests a hidden alliance that underpinned many of Mustafa Kemal's actions, allowing him the freedom to establish control over Anatolia with minimal British interference. As a result, we can conclude that even in Ataturk's speech, the British provided both political and military support to Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. To summarize, the British occupation of Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, was based on the truce that Mustafa Kemal signed with Rauf Orbay, who later became the prime minister in Ankara. This was done as a reward, allowing Mustafa Kemal Ataturk to become the sole ruler of the country and giving him the peace of mind to solidify his authority. The British handed over control and then left, marking a significant moment in history. The British Goldstream Band even played the song "Kemal is Our Commander" as they marched toward the ship. They didn't flee, They left with bells on, much like when they handed over Arabia to Sharif Hussein and departed. Interestingly, while our Kemalists call Sharif Hussein, Hussein bin Ali, king of Hejaz, a traitor, they regard Mustafa Kemal Ataturk as a hero. However, what both of them did was essentially the same. If you found this documentary insightful and eye-opening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth historical content. Join us as we uncover the untold stories and uncover the hidden truths of history. Share this video with others to keep the conversation going.